Morning, YouTube family. I just wanted to share for you today. So I've been reading through the Bible in a year. We're doing this program called Daily Audio Bible. And what it is um, there's a reader who reads through the text, discusses it, and then they do like a kind of a prayer time thing at the end, and it's kind of neat. But anyway, free download. I'll put the link for that program in the description of this video. And but anyway, so we're doing the Bible chronologically, which just means that I guess so. The story goes. So far, we've done Adam and Eve, Noah, and then Job, because, interestingly, Job apparently takes place at about the same time, or maybe earlier, than Abraham in the chronological order of storytelling in the Bible. So I found that kind of neat. And anyway, so we're going to be doing Abraham starting today, I suppose. But we just finished the story of Job, and there was a moment in there that was just really emotional for me because in his story, Job experiences the worst imaginable, heartache and pain, and then physical suffering and having everything taken away from him. And then his wife saying to him, it would be best for you to just curse God and die. And then his friends come along and say to him all these things that are not true, but from their perspective, it would seem that Job's got hidden sin, all these reasons why these things could have happened to him. And Job maintains his integrity and his, righteousness throughout the story, and just keeps on asking God, like, God, show up so I can vindicate myself before you and before my friends, and all this kind of stuff. And in the end, God does rebuke Job and says, who are you? And this is Job's response, which I found interesting. This was the emotional bit for me. He says in Job 42, verse 5 and 6, I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. I take back everything I said, and I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance. It was emotional for me because I think in some ways, over the past couple of years, I felt like I've been there. And not to Job's extent, I didn't have sores all over my body. I didn't have my wife telling me to curse God and die because, that's supportive. And I didn't have friends gathering around me trying to expose secret sin and say that that's the reason that everything was going on. So I didn't have all those components that make Job's story seem so tragic to us. But what I did have was I was at Bible college, and this is a part of my story that some people will know and some people will not. And it's only recently becoming a little bit easier to share this, but still not easy. At Bible college, in my second last year there, I suffered a pretty severe mental disorder breakdown where it landed me in the hospital in Abbotsford for about 2.5 weeks. So I had a break of what they call psychosis. You can Google it. I don't know if it fully accurately describes everything that happened, but it certainly describes certain things that happened. Anyway, so it landed me in the psych ward of the hospital for 2.5 weeks, and it was a pretty tough time. But what was really tough was the following months and year afterwards. So my understanding now, looking back on it, makes a lot of sense. Apparently, people who suffer from this kind of mental disorder, breakdown, that kind of thing, psychosis, it can take up to a year, perhaps longer for some people, for their brain to fully recover, because what it is it's pretty significant trauma to the brain. So I was actually really struggling academically at school, having a hard time focusing on what the teachers were saying. I would reread pages of a book and still not really understand their meanings up to like 6 times rereading it. And it was significantly difficult for me. And what really sucked, I suppose, was that up until that point, where I had the mental break, was I was doing a work in Bible college, and so I had pretty well straight A's for the previous semester, and even the semester where the mental break happened, I did fairly well because my work up to that point had been A work. So if I'm honest, I felt like I was in a place where I was doing, from my understanding and my perspective, God's will for my life. And so I had a real struggle to understand, like, hey, if I'm in God's will, if I'm doing what I felt like I should be doing at that time, what I felt like I'd been called to do, why was God allowing these things to happen to me? And I don't know that I have the clearest answer or a full perspective on that yet. I'm still working through certain things regarding that. But what I do have is Job's perspective. I'll read it again. He says, I had only heard about you before, but now I have seen you with my own eyes. I take back everything I said, and I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance. For me, that's important because I think I guess with suffering, with trials, it's really easy to blame God when these things happen. For me, that was my story. That is my story. I did blame God. I was angry at God. But I think time and distance from the actual event gives you a lot of perspective on things, and it allows you to work through what you'd thought and what you really do think now about what's happened to you. And so for me, that verse 6 where he says, I take back everything I said, I sit in dust and ashes to show my repentance, that struck a chord with me because it was like, yeah, God, I said some things that I wish I hadn't said to you, and I had a perspective on you that I don't think is true. Now, there's another verse in Isaiah 55, verse 8 and 9, where God says this. He says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as far as the heavens are higher than the earth, so my ways are higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. The reason I bring that up is because basically for me, it's the reminder that God is bigger, greater, stronger, more worthy, certainly, than we are. And it's easy in moments of pain to get this perspective that, God shouldn't allow these things to happen. But why? Why shouldn't he allow them to happen? And who are we to think that our thoughts are higher than God's thoughts, our ways are higher than God's ways, And so I think my journey through that mental disorder and the psychosis and everything has kind of brought me a lot of perspective on that. It's this idea that God's ways are higher than my ways. His thoughts are higher than my thoughts. So even if I don't get why things happen the way they did, maybe I need to check myself before I try and check God's priorities and perspectives on things, because his ways are higher than mine and his thoughts higher than mine. And so I want to leave you with that. I'm actually wearing a toque on purpose. You won't be able to read exactly what it says. I'll put maybe a picture or a link to a picture in the description of the video. But my toque says, he is greater than I. It's a company based out of Hawaii. And I wear this and a wristband that says the same thing as a reminder to myself that he is greater than I. His thoughts are higher than mine. His ways higher than mine. And yeah, it's a perspective switch that kind of happened for me with regard to all of this. And so it's my prayer for you that even as suffering happens and trials happen, that we wouldn't think in those moments that just because we have a take on it, that makes us right. God's ways are higher than our ways, his thoughts higher than ours, his plans higher than ours, And so I'll leave you with one final verse. It's Romans 8, verse 28. And I'll just pull it up quickly because I didn't have it ready. Here we go. I almost had it memorized at some point, so I thought I could just pull it off. Apparently not. Here we go. Romans 8, verse 28. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. And so I want to leave you with that thought. God's ways are higher than ours, his plans higher than ours, but he is ultimately working everything together for our good, for those of us who are called according to his purposes for him. Bless you, and hope your day is awesome. Thanks.